Place your hand behind your back. Stop pulling away from me. Stop resisting.
It's Pot Talk 2013, starring Joe Barton. Also starring Paula Gloria. And now here they are for tonight's edition of Pot Talk.
How you doing? Here we are doing another episode of Pot Talk. And the one thing we always bring out on most of our shows is we want to free all marijuana prisoners and we don't want any more going in. We've stated on almost all our shows how absurd the laws are, how they violate people's rights. But what we want is you people out there in television land to start becoming active, to start getting educated to the law, finding out what your rights are, and holding these politicians and judges accountable. I'm going to turn this over to Paula because she wanted to read a letter.
I thought you didn't want to do that.
Well, I didn't, but you wanted to, so go for it.
Well, there's a couple of ways we could go here. I wanted people to have an understanding of what the study of law is. Is the study of law something that's a scientific study? Is it something that would be called a hard science? Would it be humanities? Have you ever thought about that? Is it a spiritual study? That's what I wanted to get at.
Well, I think it's both spiritual and legal or political, or not necessarily political, but I'm more into common law, the law of the land, what people have decided through the ages. It basically goes, real law should all the way go back to religion. We were all taught basically in religion what's right and what's wrong. It's wrong to murder, so there should be laws against murder. It's wrong to steal, and that's pretty common, stealing. And you should, if you make a contract with someone, you should live up to the contract. Unfortunately, they've created so much stuff that they call law that really isn't law, and it isn't based on any kind of moral responsibility or correctness. It's like every time they bring people in, the state of New York or the state of Connecticut or the state of Texas is charging you with a crime. Well, who is the state of, and how do they have the authority and the right to charge you with a crime if there's no victim? If there's a victim, a harmed party, then according to all religious law, there's a harmed party, there's a victim, then there's jurisdiction for a judge to judge the case.
Yeah, wisdom dictates that.
Right, wisdom dictates that. But what we have today is just a bunch of gangsters making a bunch of so-called laws that they convince people to believe is law so they can pick their pockets and profit from incorporated slavery.
Right. When I picked up the key today, because here at Woodstock Public Access, to get the key to come into the studio, we go to the police station to get it. And so obviously we're aware that Woodstock is watching the TV shows, and particularly the police. And so when we say things like in last week, we were talking about why the politicians are never going to cooperate with you in your desire to have access to a plant, to the marijuana plant, and it started to go into the different lobbies, and it said that the police lobby was one lobby that wanted to have more pot busts because it brought more money to the police institutions, the unions. But if you actually look at the individuals and the human beings in it, what I said when I picked up this key, I because they're in new offices now, and I said, why do you need that thick bulletproof glass in a place like Woodstock? A little sleepy community like Woodstock. And he says, well, you'd be surprised. And I said, well, to tell you the truth, I know why you need it. If you keep dragging people in to court when there's no harmed party, it puts a lot of stress on the human beings that are working in that organization where they're getting directives from above to start putting pressure on to get more busts, to get the revenues up. And that's what I said. I said there at the police station, and here should be the people that we're seemingly speaking against, but it's not the people. It's not the human beings in these corporations, including the police corporations. And he understood completely clearly. Actually, there were 2 police officers in uniform, and then there was the dispatch person who now has the extra job of putting down our telephone number because we can't pass it, through the bulletproof glass. And that's what I said. We're about due process. I said the Constitution is what will protect you, and the police officers in uniform, they shook their head. You really got the feeling they really felt they would be protected by the Constitution. But you're only protected by the Constitution when you uphold it. And when you meet those challenges in your day-to-day activities, and the challenges must be just enormous as the economy is melting down, to ignore a directive from above, even though it comes from your powerful boss, it doesn't override the Constitution. You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, that's what we've been trying to tell the police. We're not against the police. We're against the police following orders that violate the Constitution. If all the police swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution, and their superiors tell them to do something that violates someone's right, they as police officers have a duty to arrest their superior. And very few of them have the cojones to do that. But we need the police. If the police don't uphold the law and the courts don't uphold the law, then all law is going to break down in this country, and we're going to have chaos. So the police, more than anybody, need to come back in line with the Constitution, because they're the ones on the front line. The people who are making money off using you police and putting you police in harm's way are the ones that you should be arresting. Those people, like when the Wall Street kids were out there, they were exercising their right to free speech. They were exercising their right to petition the government for grievances. When higher up officers or politicians told those police to beat those kids up, those police should have refused to do it because they knew they were violating the rights of those kids, and they should have turned around and arrested the people who gave them those orders. And if that started, and if it started with the police and with the military also has a responsibility to uphold and protect and defend the Constitution against foreign and domestic enemies. And when politicians send the military to do things that the military knows is criminal, the military should refuse to do it, and not just refuse to do it, but arrest the people who are committing the treason. And we have had rulings in The Hague about following orders. The Hague ruled in the Nazi Nuremberg trials that saying I followed orders is not an excuse when you violate human rights. So right now, our police force all over this country is violating human rights. It's time for the police to wake up and say, we are not going to do this anymore. We, the people, do not want to take a revolution and shoot it out with the police. Most of the police are just dupes being used, and the people who are using you, they don't care if you get hurt. So our message is to the police to uphold the Constitution, and anyone who tells you to do something that violates that, you have the authority as police to arrest them. And if the police and the military would stand up in this country and get the criminals, the bankers, and the politicians that have betrayed the trust of the American people and violated the Constitution, then we could fix this country in a short period of time. So I'm sending out a message to the police to wake up and honor your oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. And in doing so, that means that you have to protect and defend the rights of every citizen in the United States.
And it's going to protect you too. There were a couple ways I wanted to go. One is I have a letter back and forth with me and Dr. Jane Goldberg, who I produced a series, Really Real Reality TV Group Therapy. And I also have something about power objects and about a religious or a spiritual pursuit. So I was just starting this discussion with you saying that what is law really, and why are we here as human beings? What is the purpose of us being here? And where does the ego get involved? You know, when do you want to have a lot of confidence about what you're doing? And when is it important to question some of your most fervently held beliefs to see if these beliefs are actually serving you or others? In the case of a policeman who goes, say, against a directive from a higher up, when he knows that to go with that directive would be to violate his oath to protect and defend the Constitution, that kind of person is getting closer to his soul, and he's making his purpose here on this earth meaningful. Whereas somebody in a position of greater authority who flagrantly abuses his oath or his commitment, his contract, his obligation, that kind of person is breaking his connection to his soul. So in something like the Hindu system that talks about a caste system, it recognizes that on one level, all of the activities are one and the same and equal insofar as we have different things that we're good at. And ultimately, you want to find that one thing that only you can do, and if it isn't done and it lies undone, the entire society is harmed. So in many ways, we all are a very intricate part of the web of life. And when you've got different nations or different cultures that go by different rules and regulations, different codes of conduct for all the reasons that Joe laid out before, and they meet, say, on the level of commerce at high seas, you have to have a sort of a rough and ready way to get at the bottom of issues. Joe always says, court is a place to do battle. But even more than a place to do battle, it's a place to get at the bottom of things. It's a place to resolve issues. It's a place where you're hoping that the truth will come forward and any corruption or deception or fraud will quickly go by the wayside, not only for the litigants that are standing in that courtroom, but also for the peace, to keep the peace of overall society. That's why in my brief conversation, picking up the key, it was quickly understood by these police officers that if there is not due process in the courts, it puts a lot of pressure on the peace and well-being of the police community. And then you have to look overall, why do you need so many policemen and what are you trying to accomplish? So I said, if you're bringing people into courts without a harmed party, how could there be anything other than a mounting pressure? And Joe has had conversations with knowledgeable people about judges leaving around the country, or do you want to say anything about that, or you're not?
Yeah, well,
confident about the
I haven't researched it to know it as fact, but some people that I actually do communicate with quite often and do pretty good research told me that quite a few judges and a lot of politicians see that the writing's on the wall, that the criminals are that things are gonna turn around, that people are waking up, and criminals like judges are gonna be brought to justice. So he said that he has a list that he's gonna email me of 100 judges and politicians that have already, these are high-ranking judges, that have already left the country because they see that the people are waking up and they're finding out the scams, like we've pointed out the scams to you about the CRISP system, the Court Registry Investment System, where judges profit from putting people in jail and they get money to their retirement accounts. Well, a lot of these judges have taken their retirement accounts and got out of the country. And we're hoping to see many, many more judges brought to justice, because in all our courts, the local courts, we go down on the Woodstock court a lot, but it's throughout this whole county, and it really, the main criminal in this county is Donald Williams, the county judge, who's the biggest highest paid judge in this county for locking people up and filling our prisons. And before him, it was Judge Brune, who bragged that he gave out 1 million years in sentences. Well, if he was getting a couple of dollars for every year, which I'm sure he was getting a lot more than a couple of dollars, that's millions of dollars that he got from the suffering of the people that he locked up. And it also shows that he was not an unbiased, impartial judge. He was there to make a profit. And the more he locked the people, the longer he locked people up and the longer he destroyed their lives, the more money he made.
For the investors.
That's a criminal operation, and it falls under RICO. And real soon, it's time for people to start bringing all these judges to trial for a violation of RICO. And we'll be letting you know more about that kind of research that we've done, and people who are actually starting those cases, and we hope to get some cases going here in Ulster County against the criminals who've come against us.
So we want to work with people throughout the world, and whatever culture they happen to be. I have friends in Cyprus who are giving me the lowdown of what's going on with the banks there, and there's some interesting things we could read. Do you want me to read the banking first?
If you want, sure.
Okay. Because I thought I could do the psychoanalysis while you took your smoking break.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, Benjamin Fulford, plasma ball spotted over Mount Fuji, HARP attack suspected. Of course, this is your April 1st, 2013 article. A powerful plasma ball was spotted over Mount Fuji and photographed by this writer. The photography clearly showed the plasma burning over the massive volcano. The photograph above and the one below were taken from Shinjuku near the Tokyo government office buildings. The photographs have raised a suspicion of a HARP attack by the cabal aimed at setting off an eruption of Mount Fuji. To prevent this attack on Mount Fuji from escalating, retaliation has begun with the simulation of volcanic and earthquake activity around the Atlantic Canary Islands using highly classified technical means. Scientists have noted that if the La Palma rock formation in the Canary Islands falls into the ocean, it would trigger a 100-meter tsunami that would hit the east coast of the United States, large parts of southern Europe, West Africa, and South America. To avoid escalation, the White Dragon Society strongly urges the cabal to cease all wars and peacefully surrender its criminal control of the rest of the Western financial system. The precise nature of the plasma ball spotted above Mount Fuji has been determined by Japanese experts to be the sun. More specifically, the pictures are of the sun setting over Mount Fuji and were taken by this writer last fall and saved for the April 1st edition of this newsletter. However, all jokes aside, the cabal really did threaten multiple times to trigger an eruption of Mount Fuji using nuclear bombs that have been buried in 4 locations around the base of the mountain. The threats were withdrawn after counter threats were made to hit the La Palma rock formation with nuclear missiles. This is the kind of criminally insane activity the current leaders of the West engage in. The actual ongoing volcanic activity at the Canary Islands, however, appears to be entirely natural in origin.
Okay,
that is
let me
an
jump
act
in
of
on
God.
that just a minute.
Yeah.
But isn't it crazy that they're talking about bombs being buried by the Mount Fuji to set it off? That's how we kind of disrupt things all over the world. And they're saying, yeah, well, if you do that, we're going to hit the Canary Islands and create a tidal wave that's going to hit the East Coast. But isn't that crazy that our leaders are now talking on that kind of level to create such devastation as tidal waves that hit the East Coast, or that we're going to blow up Mount Fuji to create a volcano? I mean, we have real criminals in government, and we need them taken out. And the people we need to take them out, you or I, the basic person out here, cannot take out these criminal politicians. But our military can, and our FBI can, and I believe in all branches of our government, we have two branches. We have FBI that have sworn an oath to protect and defend the Constitution, and they are loyal to the American people. And then we have FBI that are selling out to the rich financial interests and doing the bidding of criminals. And the same thing with our CIA. I believe that we have half the CIA are good guys who are trying to protect our country and do the right thing, and the other half have sold out to the criminals. And I believe it's that way from the top to the bottom. What we need is the good CIA to take out the bad CIA, the good FBI to take out the bad FBI, the good politicians to get rid of the criminals. And if everybody did their job, and if everybody from the top to the bottom started protecting our constitutional form of government, we could fix this country in a short period of time. We don't need a big rise of the mass armed like they did in France, where we go to Washington and start taking off heads. That's not the answer. The answer is to bring the criminals to justice, try them, seize their assets for their crimes. Like if they catch someone smoking pot, the first thing they do is come in and seize all your money, and if you're growing pot outside, they seize your property. Well, the World Banks have seized 14 million homes, and that they did it all through criminal things. Now, through
No
fraud.
due process.
Right, through fraud and no due process, and all kinds of scams. Now, if the police, the real FBI that are on good guys, went after these criminals, brought them to justice, and returned the stolen wealth to the nation, our nation would no longer be in debt. They stole all the gold from our nation, and that was all done through fraud and criminality. And if our military and our police organizations like the FBI and the CIA really did their jobs and went after the criminals that have betrayed our nation and sold out our nation and let the wealth be stolen, if they brought them to justice, that wealth could be returned to the United States, and we'd once again be an economic power. And then secondly, we got to stop making war for corporate interests. War only profits the rich and greedy. It does not profit any part of society. So we've reached a point where we've had so many war, thousands and thousands of years of war, and what have we accomplished but another war? It's time to stop it and start putting that money into taking care of the people.
Okay.
Go ahead, pick up where you left off.
Okay, so there's also a lot of seismic activity taking place in the financial world. The shutting down of the banks in Cyprus has apparently dealt a nasty blow to many groups of gangsters, including Sicilian, Calabrese, Camorra, Turkish and Russian mafia groups, according to an Italian P2 Freemason lodge source. The more well-connected gangsters were able to move their money out to Malta, Morocco, and Tunisia, the source continued. It's kind of interesting because it's a jokey article, but he is getting in some interesting stuff here. I used to live in the island of Cyprus, and when I was there in around the mid-90s, when Russia fell, there were people that were leaving, the bureaucrats that were left when the central government fell, they were just selling any asset they had access to the highest bidder, and then taking suitcases full of money and heading out of Russia. And real estate agents in Cyprus were told never to show a house to one Russian living next to another Russian, because you didn't know who was stealing from who in that country. So when I went with my husband at the time, an Italian, we were doing work on eco-villages up to Findhorn for a sustainable community conference. We found people in Russia who were at the other side of all that money being taken out of Russia. These were families who would adopt a child or two to try to make it through the hard winter. They were facing starvation. So it was interesting that I was able, in a short time, to both see the effects of suitcases full of money coming into Cyprus, but also to see the face of what that was like, what they left behind. So, higher level players were able to take their funds out of Cyprus and into Switzerland, Liechtenstein, and Luxembourg, according to an M15 source, an MI5 source. Honest businessmen in Cyprus, for their part, got thoroughly shafted. I know some of these honest businessmen in Cyprus, and it makes me really sad because life is tough. One of my friends is a gem dealer, and he's married to a sitar player from China,
Yeah, let me
from
jump in
India.
again. But one of the things that this is pointing out, which I find kind of humorous, that so many factions have run scams on the people, and now all those factions are fighting amongst themselves. They see that it's coming down real soon, that the scam can't be hidden, and this group is trying to give up the other group. Like this mafia group is going, it wasn't us, it was that mafia group, and that mafia group is going, no, it was this other group, and no, it was the Russians. And all these criminals are now pointing fingers at each other, and I think that's a real wonderful thing happening.
Well, that's why I'm interested in psychoanalysis and spiritual practice, because the Founding Fathers talked about the evil that lurks within the hearts of all men. So you want to constantly be purifying yourself, right, except Joe. Okay, the Cyprus money grab has triggered, as mentioned last week, an escalating shift of funds out of Italy, Spain, and other EU countries. Political chaos and unrest is also continuing in many European countries, notably Italy, which remains without a proper government. Both MI5 and P2 sources believe the situation in Cyprus was a proxy war between the Germans and the Russians, but it is not clear at this point who got the better of the battle. Later on, I'm going to be reading something from Alexis Obolensky, who is a great scientist. Very, very colorful career this man has had. When he was a very young boy, who's old lady Guggenheim? Who started the Guggenheim Museum? Do you know, Randy? That beautiful round building?
No,
the Guggenheim
museums.
Museum?
I know about the Guggenheim Museum, but I know nothing of its history.
Well, when Alexis Obolensky was a very little boy, Yogananda was visiting the country. And because he's an older man now, this was a long time ago. And Yogananda was being brought to visit whoever started the Guggenheim Museum, that elderly matron. And they could not get Yogananda away from this little boy. He was so fascinated and spent a lot of time with this little boy, who eventually became a great scientist. And he worked in the 50s with the Eisenhower regime, and he became a whistleblower. And so he eventually, with his inventions, he was really able to very much walk in the steps of Nikola Tesla. I don't know if he would... he's a humble man, and Tesla was a very great man, but what he's accomplished is tremendous. And what as Joe and I move forward with the work that we're doing, the research into the banks, into the securitization of even prisoners, into human trafficking, into what's going on in child non-protective services, it gets so gloomy and so depressing that you are always looking to give the best information you can to the viewers, but in many ways, you depend on viewers to get feedback from them, and that's what's so monumental about the internet and about posting on the internet, where you can get comments below. Because of those comments, you can start to take a body of knowledge, and through editing and a good presentation, you present your position and your viewpoint, but with the hopes that you're going to stimulate a big response in somebody else, and even if they don't agree with you, they'll come back with you in such a way that you perfect your understanding. Now, it seemed as though there was a misunderstanding. Egos got pushed out of shape, And it was felt that I wasn't being respectful when I showed an interview that Alan Steinfeld had done with Alexis Obolensky on his technology. And I sent it to an expert on ozone in California, and she said, well, it turns out that, is this the genius Jane was talking about? And he wasn't right on his predictions of the Earth. Well, I think everybody knows that the Mayan cosmogenesis 2012 has come and gone, and most of us didn't see all these monumental changes. Now, the monumental changes may indeed be on another level. And I like to do I'm pretty aggressive in my paperwork in court, but I also tend to push it in my emails, because I'm feeling, with what Joe and I have discovered, a certain urgency to get this information out as quickly as possible so that it lands in the laps of those experts that can, once they know that an audience has been developed, like me and Joe and other people throughout the country, who are starting to challenge people in court, not because they're, great legal whizzes, or because they're contrarians that they want to go before a judge without a bar attorney. But in most of the cases, it's because these people are desperate. It's because they've been brought up to believe they were free. They're utterly shocked that at this time in their life they can't pay their property taxes, or they've lost their job, their pensions no more. And so they use what they have available, which might be an internet connection for as long as they have it. And they start doing research, and they come up with things that got Joe and Jay out of jail. What do you want to say?
And now we want to take a break. We're doing a commercial, and we want you people to watch this commercial carefully.
We're your local high-speed internet and cable provider. Are you looking for a fast, reliable internet connection? A large selection of your favorite HD TV channels? With 24/7 access to the best customer support technicians, all at a fair price? Fuck you. You'll take what we give you. You'll have the option of choosing from several of our completely unwarranted rip-offs, including internet speeds up to 200 times slower than Korea at twice the price, TV packages with over 500 channels, 90% of which you can't view, and we guarantee a plethora of hidden fees. Then, our barely trained technicians will come to install your services somewhere between the hours of 8 a.m. and 10 p.m., knock once while you're in the shower, and promptly leave. And once we do finally get your service up and running, it'll be down and limping within 3 hours. Indefinitely. Why, you ask? Simple. We are part of what is called an oligopoly. It's like a monopoly, only legal. See, in closed-door meetings with 4 or 5 of the other major providers, we've secretly agreed not to have differing prices, allowing us to completely eliminate any competition and collectively raise our prices to optimum cockbag levels. Because we here at your local high-speed internet and cable provider don't believe in customer satisfaction. We believe in money. Pools of money. Looking for a better deal? You can oligobble down our balls. You're paying for it. Your local high-speed internet and cable provider. You won't like it, and there's no other option.
Okay, so here's my emails to Jane Goldberg. Jane says, and this is pretty much like me writing to the attorney about power of attorney in Greece. What I did was there's parts in green and yellow going back and forth. But the purpose is to get at what's really bothering me these days is the pharmaceutical companies giving out antidepressant drugs so cavalierly, with so little research done on the side effects, and so much obvious problems with them right on the surface. And so I was reaching out constantly to Jane Goldberg because she called to my attention that in the 60s and 70s and 80s, there was a man named Hyman Spotnitz who started a body of knowledge using psychoanalysis, where you could take a patient that was so narcissistic he wasn't even aware that you were in the room. I mean, think about that. Imagine doing something delicate like analysis, and the person's not even aware that you're there. You can understand why Sigmund Freud thought that this was impossible. So having done research on it, I was enthused, but I saw, and I learned down at the Center for Modern Psychoanalytic Studies, that around in the 70s, the pharmaceutical company was very aggressive to get psychoanalysis under a medical rubric so that you would have medication that could be prescribed by doctors. And it was pointed out to me, surprisingly, that Sigmund Freud never imagined that doctors would be the ones that would be involved with his discoveries. He had imagined that analysis would be done by people in the humanities. So I was trying to put it at here we had this disagreement or this misunderstanding, so I thought, and I think Alexis reached out to Jane Goldberg first, so I thought, that's great, I'll bite the bait and run with it. So she goes, "Oh God, Paula, I can't imagine that there was ever a time that I said or indicated or intimated that I was right about everything." I'll read it through how she says it first, and I'll say my points. "You can't possibly have meant to suggest that, because to do so would be so highly offensive to any thinking, self-reflecting person. Furthermore, I have never anywhere said that diet is everything in terms of reversing cancer. I wouldn't say that because I don't believe that. If I believed that, I wouldn't be a psychoanalyst who is specialized in working with cancer patients. Perhaps I would be a nutritionist. I do believe in the healing power of relationships, and thus I do what I do. I also believe in the healing power of energy when it is in the right form of energy, and thus I believe in Alexis's creation. I have no idea whether Alexis and I agree on radiation stuff. It has never come up in conversations with him, so I remain unaware of what his stance on it is. I am also unaware of my own stance on many aspects of radiation. Research contradicts itself all over the place on various aspects of the safety of radiation. I am not a researcher of radiation. And I have had very little first-hand experience with the phenomenon other than living with its daily raining down on my body as it does on all creatures of the earth. I have a lot of opinions about the human psyche, as I have a lot of first-hand exposure to its working. So you're saying that I may not be being honest in my relationship with Alexis in order to keep harmony is just plain insulting to me. And sometimes I take a risk to be insulting because I'm trying to quickly get at the source of what's going on. And I felt I learned a lot of that from Jane or by studying Hyman Spotnitz, because what he realized, Sigmund Freud couldn't get a narcissistic patient to be successfully treated in psychoanalysis until he got the narcissistic patient to form an ego and to recognize a me and them, so that when the patient was furious at Spotnitz and hated Spotnitz, he had created a division that didn't exist before, going back to when the infant is in the mother's womb and is living in this sort of oceanic oneness between him and his mother. You need that force that Freud called thanatos, or the dividing or destructive force, to create a division between the child and his mother so that he forms an ego. It goes, and finally, my experience with people when they disagree is that usually the issues that come up in disagreements are not entirely rational, and that for lots of non-rational reasons, people are not so susceptible to having their minds changed through the sheer force of a persuasive argument. Nevertheless, I absolutely believe in dialogue, though I do think its ability to shift opinions is limited, but it is the best we have. And that's what Joe and I are often talking about, is dealing in court with the best of what we have. So let me just, with what she said so far, when she said, I can't imagine there was ever a time when I said I was right about everything. I was mostly saying, so what if people are wrong about the Mayan cosmogenesis 2011? And she's pretty funny about how she says it. I said, that was my point, Jane. That is why I did not think I was wrong about telling Alexis that he was wrong about the prediction. We all do the best we can at the time we do whatever it is that we feel needs to be done. And so Jane goes, I don't know his prediction, and I don't know that he was wrong. He suggested in one of his emails how long it takes for the Earth to make its changes, so maybe he wasn't wrong. But perhaps for the sake of all Earth, we should hope he was wrong. I thought that was pretty diplomatic of her to deal with it that way. So then and she said it was offensive to any self-reflecting, thinking person to think that they're always right. And I said, yes, yes, again reflecting my ongoing enthusiasm for you and your work, the work you told me you most love doing. Because when I was working with Jane Goldberg on the documentary for radiation hormesis, she told me that what her real passion was doing psychoanalysis, and that what her real dream was to do a group therapy on television. And that she had taken that idea to Time Warner over 30 years ago, but that her idea got put on the back burner because Time Warner was absorbed with something that became court TV. And so I told her, I said I was glad that she took a risk producing public access television with me, and that I was aware that most academics would shy away from public access. And she very generously made this comment. I didn't see that I was taking a risk at all. As I said in the very first session, I had had a dream of doing TV group therapy for 30 years. I seized the opportunity because the opportunity opened up. I will be forever grateful to you for our creation of that work. I am proud of it. And you did a very good job producing it, getting it on YouTube, and promoting it, and me, both before that and after that. And then I told her, I said, I promote what I believe in beyond money, certainly Federal Reserve notes, as I have learned the limitation of their reach. Like anyone else, however, of course, Joe and I want to be acknowledged for the extremely hard work we have done and will continue to do. We want to teach others how to do it, but since it is hard, we can't just teach anyone, but we have stumbled upon something so valuable, we must at least try to leave the content. And I want to just make one other comment that she made about my personality that you agreed with, just to show how important self-worth.
One of the few things me and Jane agree on.
Okay, here she goes. Okay, here was one thing, is as Jane started to work on the book on radiation hormesis, many fundamental beliefs that she and I believed in started to shift. And she went through this process months before I did, because she finished the book before we started to assemble the interviews that were taken with scientists. And I could see straight away that Alexis and I would disagree on radiation, and so I thought that because Jane wanted me to frame her as an expert on radiation hormesis, I wanted to have Jane go to more events, like, say, Nathan Koenig had a nuclear energy kind of event that was going to happen, and I was even offered a chance to speak at it. But I considered myself just the videographer. I didn't really consider myself the expert, but I would have loved it if Jane would have spoken at that and I could have videotaped it. So I said, I have no idea whether Alexis and I agree on radiation stuff. So here's me being the contrarian that I am. This is because you avoid confrontation. So here I am telling a psychotherapist that they're avoiding confrontation. So she says back, I'm not aware I avoid confrontation. I'm not aware I avoid anything. However, I do usually follow the policy of what Spotnitz called contact functioning, which is to give out info as it will prove to be useful to the person and is wanted by the person. And then so she interrupted my flow here. I said, this is because you avoid confrontation, my words. And I realize that for me to even use this word is confrontational. And perhaps there's a better word for, and here's, I'm sure an academic could come up with a better word, but here's a better word for wanting everyone to know about radiation hormesis, but not really telling those who might disagree or take too much time to show otherwise. Like, in other words, it takes a while to explain certain things, and sometimes you feel it's not worth the investment of time and energy. So again, Jane goes on. Again, the point, and I thought this was really great, and I'd never heard this before, and it made so much sense. And it also starts to tie in some of the questions that I'm hoping to address when I speak at the Woodstock Public Library Forum on meditation and mental health, whether this is a moral or medical question, and whose jurisdiction is it accordingly, albeit from going from Henry James to Sigmund Freud. But here's Jane's great sentence. Again, the point is not about disagreement. It's about not spilling sperm, to use a biblical reference. My information, my opinions, my thoughts and feelings, they are the equivalent of my sperm, and I don't give them forth indiscriminately. I give them as they will be fruitful and rich and productive and lead to the creation of life. I follow that principle in every aspect of my life. You don't. You give info as you decide that other person needs to know. You make the decision for the other person as though you know better than they do what is best for the person. I choose not to be so grandiose about my opinions, thoughts, and feelings. And this is actually what a master told me that in India too. He said, you have everything you need, Paula. The only thing you're lacking is confidence. And he also says, be careful to let other people figure things out by themselves. So do you have any comments on that? Because I'm making myself available.
I know better.
But does that make
I have to go home with her, you know.
Oh, I see. Well, anyway, so she goes on. It has never come up in conversation with him, back to me saying, why don't you talk to Alexis about radiation? So I remain unaware of what his stance on it is. I'm also unaware of my own stance. Okay, so then I said, Jane, you wanted me to highlight you as an expert on radiation. This was a sore point between us on the dock. I mean, look at, ladies and gentlemen, let's not kid ourselves. Creation is a messy process. When you're involved in creation, there can be differences of opinion. Tempers can flare, right? And people have a different aesthetic opinion. Do you have anything to say, Randy? I'm hearing you laughing.
No, I'm just relating to it.
You're relating to the creation process. Okay. Okay, I did not, and this is Jane, and do not want nor claim to be an expert on radiation. I have done very little reading on radiation. I do claim and want to be known, however, as an expert of radiation hormesis. But even with radiation hormesis, I got to some websites where I found an expert, and they thought that I was some spy from the CIA. They did not want to be on my show, and they were trading information about this quietly. There was also another site called Nuke Lies, but I don't know if that site's up anymore. Anyway, Jane goes on, and I have done a great deal of reading on that subject, which is radiation hormesis. And that was the expertise I was looking for you to advance in terms of the doc that we made together, begun in the spirit of cooperation, and which I paid for, but which ultimately you held hostage, refusing to do any further work on it, and also refusing me to allow to own any of it. Well, what it was is I was seeing something develop, and I wanted to protect it. I said, Jane, for me, and I talked to Alan Stein.
Let me jump in for a second. She's talking about she wanted to protect her TV show. Go ahead.
No, it was the documentary.
Well,
This radiation hormesis is an amazing topic. These radioactive stones, low-level natural radioactive stones, when I started working with them, it actually, and I have photographic evidence, I used to use reading glasses. I don't use reading glasses anymore. And I can see there are times when I don't drink as much of the water that has the radioactive stone in it, or sleep on the radioactive pad, and when I'm feeling the need, I bring the stones closer to me, and I definitely feel a benefit from it. I'm also aware of...
I want to jump in. This is low-level radiation, which you get from the sun, we get from our environment all the time. Our body needs a certain amount of low-level radiation, just to be... Some people don't... people don't think you're crazy. We're not talking about nuclear fission type radiation.
Okay, so to go on to talk about the relationship, because I knew Alexis, most people have very strong opinions about nuclear energy. So I said to her, I'm happy to be corrected here, but I'm not convinced yet that I am wrong. I hope I am, because a good discussion about radiation hormesis between you and Alexis would allow me to pass on what you two developed to Philip Lipitz, who is an expert but but like many experts are hesitant to come out on record. So what I'm trying to tell you is you, the viewer, have a lot of power if you express yourself more. And if you express yourself more, like say come to court with us or write comments when we have blogs,
Or write your senators or congressmen,
Yeah.
or the local judges that you don't like with the way they're acting in a criminal manner.
or for the sake of the
Get
police.
involved.
Or for the sake of the good police and the good judges and the good public servants, when we are active and attentive, we got their back. They can then say to their boss, "Are you kidding? You want me to do that?" That's, and look at these people, they're watching. That's what I'm thinking. So, again, Jane goes, I have no idea about Alexis's familiarity nor opinions about radiation hormesis. As I said, the subject has never come up between us. I wrote a book about it. I researched it. I made a documentary with you about it. It is a very small part of what I have studied, and probably, to my mind and my interest, the least interesting subject I have studied. I have much more value my work and thoughts about the human psyche and the role of psychoanalysis in healing a damaged psyche. That is really the only subject I consider myself an expert on, because it is the only subject that I have studied in vivo. That means in life, firsthand, as opposed to in vitro in the test tube. And firsthand, because people are dying, that's the name of the book, is the book I am least proud of having written. It only took me 5 months. Every other book I have written has taken between 2 and 30 years. The 30-year one I'm still working on. Well, I know that down at the Center for Modern Psychoanalytic Studies, Jane Goldberg is probably one of the most published authors there. And her mentor before her, who worked with Hyman Spotnitz and probably is the important force that Hyman Spotnitz even got any video done. There is the only video I know of is an 8-part lecture series done in 1979. But people are not reading so much today. I mean, I love going down to their library and picking up books and reading about how masturbation in the old days, scientists would quote moral reasons not to do it, and religious people would quote scientific reasons not to do it, and all the while nobody is looking reasonably at it, and those who are villainized by society. If people only knew the great efforts that these early psychoanalysts made so that people could start to even address very basic issues of sexuality, it's really tremendous. So I was always hoping that this center would get a little bit more aggressive doing more video work, and that it wasn't all on the shoulders of only Jane Goldberg working with me to do this series.
Let's talk about Alexis a little bit. What was who was the scientist who he got a lot of his research from, or a lot of?
Well, I think he, like many other people, because energy work and free energy devices, Molly's father said there's 5,000 free energy patents
locked up. What was the famous
up.
scientist that he
Nikola
used to?
Tesla.
Nikola Tesla, that's
Nikola
it.
Tesla.
Alexis has a machine similar that on the principles of Nicola Tesla, and it's quite an interesting machine. Me and Paula were in it, and it zaps you with all this crazy kind of electricity, but you actually feel quite stimulated after you come out of the machine. And he's been using it to heal people.
Well, he's had many, many different versions, and over the period of years, I've seen different ones. One that I had a very dramatic effect was I went with a friend who was in very bad shape with AIDS, I guess you'd say. Now, he was a very savvy guy who told me that in the West Village they were going around with trucks of hepatitis B or C inoculations they were giving. I don't know, do you know anything about this, Randy, in the 80s? How they were inoculating particularly gay men for hepatitis C. After these inoculations, there was a huge spate of people being very ill in the hospital. And he said, he was my hairdresser, and he told me that he knew nurses at the time that said something is really wrong. Well, recently, Rod Clash showed us the congressional records that showed there was a government program to create a vaccine and it was given out through hepatitis B or C, whatever it was they were
And the
giving.
military created it as
Yeah.
a weapon against we the people. That's the bad
Yeah.
military. There's good military and bad.
Right, and there's all kinds of different scams, so you have to know which scam is running. Like this was only for a small period of time. Later on, I started to read a book called Why We'll Never Win the War on AIDS. Oh my goodness, we only have 4 minutes left. Written by a student of Duisburg at the University of California at Berkeley. And Duisburg's theory was that HIV is one of thousands of harmless passenger viruses that the body naturally carries around. Both theories could be right. You just have to know when they are. Now, my hairdresser had avoided all of these shots and everything for decades, so I couldn't understand why all of a sudden, as he was getting older, he starts to take these deadly drugs when he was told that he had to clean up his liver before he would be allowed to get a liver transplant. And he had insurance for it. He had $1 million worth of insurance. And he hated to interact with me because I said, look at, this is all about replacing body parts. Why don't you go to a deeper level of science and medicine to where it's not replacing body parts? I see 3 minutes. But this was difficult because the experts are being trained to just shift around. It has their soul knows how much time they want to spend on this dimension and when it's time to press on. And I think that's one of the most important things that a healer has to learn. We have run across so many brilliant remedies done in many different circumstances, but not always will every cure work for everybody on all circumstances at all times. So I do believe that the ultimate answer to curing the body is to address the psyche and heartbreak. I do believe that heartbreak is at the basis of all disease, and any disease can be healed if you address the heartbreak. There was another comment I wanted to look for. Do you have anything to say? Or Randy, while I look for it, we only have a minute left.
I don't know. I've had my experiences with medicine in the gay community in New York, and that almost killed me. And the best medicine for me has always just been the minimum. I'm not going to let anybody push anything that I don't know where it came from or what it contains through needles into my veins. It just seems completely, after everything you've said and after everything we know, just completely contrary to what would be in my best interest. That's just how I feel about it.
We actually have the research from Rod Class that shows that the government created the AIDS virus and spread it all over the place purposely. We will eventually, when we get that information up on our website, we'll download it and do a show on it, because I definitely want to do a show on that.
Well, I went there with my hairdresser, and the session was for him, but at that time the machine made a big pop noise and it scared him, and so I got his session. And it was a fabulous experience. It really was, it was wonderful.
And I think it's time for us to say good night, right?
Pretty much.
Okay, we're going to say good night from Pot Talk. And remember, we want all you people out there in television land to work on freeing all the marijuana prisoners and stopping any more from going in jail. So this is Joe and Paula saying good night.
Bye for Pot Talk.
You've been watching Pot Talk 2013, starring Joe Barton. Also starring Paula Gloria. Be sure to tune in next week at this same time for more Pot Talk TV. This has been a Manifestation production.